cast out in the storm. Rain hammered against the earth as though heaven itself was weeping. At the grand iron gates of the Williams mansion, a young black nanny stood trembling, her thin dress soaked through, her arms wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the towering gates that separated her from the life she once knew. Amara had lived in those golden halls, caring for children who weren't her own, scrubbing marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, serving food so rich she could barely imagine its taste. She had been invisible to them, just another servant, another shadow in the mansion's glittering world. Yet for one fleeting moment, she had been seen. Adrian Williams, the heir to the billion-dollar empire, had looked at her not as a servant, but as a woman. In quiet corners of the mansion, away from the eyes of his watchful mother, Adrian had found in Amara the tenderness his gilded life had never given him. Their stolen glances grew into whispers, their whispers into touches, and one reckless night blurred the line between master and servant forever. That night left her with more than memories. It left her with a tiny heartbeat growing inside her, a secret that was both her greatest joy and her greatest fear. But secrets have a way of spilling in houses made of glass. Margaret Williams, Adrian's mother, had discovered the truth, and fury consumed her like wildfire. "You dare to shame this family?" she had hissed, her words like venom. "A servant carrying our blood? Never." Now, in the storm, Amara felt the weight of those words. The guards had dragged her from her small quarters, ignoring her cries, deaf to her pleas. Adrian had stood at the top of the marble staircase, his face pale, his fists clenched, his mouth silent. She had begged him with her eyes, prayed for him to speak, to claim her, to claim their child. But he had turned away, bound by fear, shackled by the chains of his mother's power. And so, Amara was cast out into the night. The mansion loomed behind her like a cruel dream, its lights glowing warm against the rain, while she stood cold, alone, and unwanted. Thunder roared, drowning her sobs as she stumbled down the empty road. Her body trembled with every step, but she clung to her belly, whispering through tears, "I will protect you. No matter what, my child, I will protect you." Each drop of rain stung like betrayal. Each flash of lightning reminded her of the life she had been stripped of. She had no money, no home, no family. Only her unborn child and the storm to keep her company. But somewhere beneath the weight of despair, a spark of defiance flickered. They had thrown her away as though she were nothing, but she would prove she was more. She would rise. She would survive. For in her arms, she carried not just a burden, but a legacy they could never erase. Inside the mansion, Adrian Williams paced the length of his room, his hands trembling. Rain pounded against the tall glass windows, but the storm within him was louder. He could still hear Amara's cries echoing through the hall as she was dragged away. He had wanted to run to her, to defy his mother, but fear rooted him to the floor. Adrian had been raised in the iron grip of his mother, Margaret. To the world, he was the polished, confident heir, charming, handsome, untouchable. But beneath the surface, he was a man shackled by duty. His entire life had been scripted for him. The right schools, the right friends, the right M, and now the right lie. He had never meant to fall for Amara. At first, she was simply a face among the staff. But then he noticed the way she hummed softly while folding sheets, the way her smile lit up even the darkest corners of the house, the way she treated everyone, child or servant, with kindness. She was a mirror of everything his world lacked, and he had fallen. But now that love had consequences. A child. His child. He sat on the edge of his bed, running his hands through his hair, his heart pounding with guilt. He knew his mother's words were cruel, but he also knew she would stop at nothing to protect the family's image. "A servant's child will never bear our name," she had declared. And Adrian, weak, torn, afraid, had obeyed in silence. But as he stared into the storm that night, he whispered into the emptiness, "I'm sorry, Amara. I'm sorry, my child." Little did he know that his silence would echo for years, shaping destinies far beyond his control. The morning after the storm, The mansion returned to its routine of elegance and order. No one spoke of the screams that had pierced the night. Servants whispered in corners, but none dared question Margaret's authority. Amara's room was already cleared, her few belongings discarded as though she had never existed. To the Williams family, she was gone, erased. But to Amara, walking through the streets with nothing but her swollen belly and the echo of betrayal, every step was a reminder of what had been stolen. Her heart still ached for Adrian, the man who had once whispered promises in her ear. She had believed him when he said he loved her. She had believed his touch was more than desire. But love that does not fight is no love at all. And now the right lie. He had never meant to fall for Amara. At first, she was simply a face among the staff. But then he noticed the way she hummed softly while folding sheets, the way her smile lit up even the darkest corners of the house, the way she treated everyone, child or servant, with kindness. She was a mirror of everything his world lacked, and he had fallen. But now that love had consequences. A child, his child. He sat on the edge of his bed, running his hands through his hair, his heart pounding with guilt. He knew his mother's words were cruel, but he also knew she would stop at nothing to protect the family's image. A servant's child will never bear our name, she had declared. And Adrian, weak, torn, afraid, had obeyed in silence. But as he stared into the storm that night, he whispered into the emptiness, "I'm sorry, Amara. I'm sorry, my child." Little did he know that his silence would echo for years, shaping destinies far beyond his control. The morning after the storm, the mansion returned to its routine of elegance and order. No one spoke of the screams that had pierced the night. Servants whispered in corners, but none dared question Margaret's authority. Amara's room was already cleared, her few belongings discarded as though she had never existed. To the Williams family, she was gone, erased. But to Amara, walking through the streets with nothing but her swollen belly and the echo of betrayal, every step was a reminder of what had been stolen. Her heart still ached for Adrian, the man who had once whispered promises in her ear. She had believed him when he said he loved her. She had believed his touch was more than desire. But love that does not fight is no love at all. That night replayed in her mind over and over. The look in Adrian's eyes, the way he turned away, his silence louder than any rejection. When her legs gave out, she collapsed against the wall of an abandoned building, her tears mixing with the rain. She was hungry, cold, and terrified, but when she placed her hands on her belly, she found the strength to rise again. "You are all I have," she whispered to her unborn child, "and I will not let them destroy you." From that moment on, Amara knew she could no longer rely on anyone else. The mansion was gone, Adrian was gone, and the world would offer her no kindness. She would have to carve her own path in a world designed to break women like her. But she was not just a woman anymore. She was a mother, and mothers fight with everything they have. Months passed, and Amara gave birth to a tiny, fragile boy she named Ethan. His first cry was soft but full of life, and she clutched him close, whispering promises she did not yet know how to keep. Their new home was a cramped, damp apartment, the walls thin and cracked, the floor cold beneath their feet. Life was relentless. Amara washed clothes for strangers, cooked for family she didn't know, and worked from dawn until the stars blinked awake, but she never let Ethan go hungry. Yet as the days turned into months, she began to notice differences in her son. He did not smile or laugh as other children did. He would rock back and forth for hours, lost in his own world. Doctors whispered words she could barely understand. Autistic requires patience, lifelong care. Her heart broke at first, but then it steeled. If the world would not accept Ethan, she would protect him fiercely. The city around them was indifferent and cruel. Neighbors laughed at his odd movements. Strangers sneered at her for carrying him everywhere. But she kissed his forehead, held his small hands in hers, and whispered, "You are my gift, not my shame. I will fight for you until my last breath." While Amara and Ethan struggled in their tiny apartment, the Williams mansion shimmered with life and celebration. Adrian, adorned in the finest suit, married Catherine Monroe in a ceremony broadcast for all to admire. Champagne sparkled, music soared, and the world cheered their perfect union. Yet inside Adrian's chest, a hollow ache echoed. He smiled for cameras, laughed at jokes, danced with elegance, but inside, he was haunted by the memory of Amara and the child he had abandoned. Meanwhile, Amara tucked Ethan in a bed after a long day of labor, her body aching, her spirit exhausted. As she watched him sleep, she whispered, "We may have nothing else, but we have each other." The contrast between their worlds was sharp, bitter, and unyielding. One was lost in gold, the other in love that no wealth could buy. Years passed, and Ethan grew, delicate and quiet, yet fiercely intelligent in his own way. He spoke rarely, but his eyes held a depth that left strangers unsettled. Amara devoted herself entirely to him, balancing work, care, and the endless tasks of survival. The city tested her at every turn. Employers tried to cheat her. People mocked her child. Yet in the darkest nights, when Ethan would reach for her hand and say even a single word, hope blazed within her heart. Slowly, a community of helpers appeared. A kind doctor offered therapy at reduced cost, a neighbor brought food, a teacher volunteered to read to Ethan. Though small, these gestures fueled her, and together, they carved out a fragile, bright corner in a cruel world. Adrian's life, in contrast, began to crumble. Catherine's infidelities came to light. Investments failed, allies turned their backs, and Margaret's relentless pursuit of perfection could not stop the cracks forming in the family empire. One rainy afternoon, lost in thought, Adrian wandered the city streets and happened upon a modest stall selling second-hand clothes. And there she was, Amara, radiant in her dignity, Ethan beside her, now older, calm, and composed in a way Adrian had never seen before. Guilt gnawed at him. The woman he had abandoned had built a life from nothing, while he had squandered his fortune, his family's respect, and the chance to be a true father. When Charles Williams, the family patriarch, fell gravely ill, the truth of the inheritance shook the household. In his final moments, he declared that the true heir was Ethan, the child of Amara, not Adrian. Chaos erupted. Margaret raged. Adrian trembled, but Amara stood firm, her hands clutching her son. She did not cower. "Heir," she said quietly, "my son is mine first, and I will never let him be a pawn." The words cut deeper than any sword. Charles blessed Ethan with his final breath, his eyes soft with understanding, and then passed peacefully, leaving behind a fortune that would never touch the hands of those who had scorned the boy's mother. Amara's strength and patience were rewarded not by wealth, but by freedom. She walked away from the mansion with Ethan, the rain now a gentle drizzle instead of storm. The golden gates faded behind her, a symbol of the world that had rejected them. Adrian, broken, sought forgiveness, but Amara held her head high. She had survived. She had protected her son, and she had done it on her own terms. As they reached the edge of the city, Ethan looked up at her, his small hand in hers, and whispered, "Mama." Amara smiled, tears streaming down her face, kissed his forehead, and said, "Yes, my love. Mama is here, and we are free." They walked forward together, into a future uncertain, yet radiant with love, dignity, and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. The mansion, the storms, the betrayals, all faded behind them. Amara was no longer a servant. She was a mother, a survivor, and a woman who had claimed her own destiny. And in her arms, Ethan flourished, a living testament to her courage and her unwavering love.